Hello and welcome back. This is going to be, I think, the final piece of Path of the Empress, step 15. And what I want to talk briefly about is distortions, because that's often related to the Devil card, and it has to do with the first video in this of judging a book by its cover and things of that nature. But it's also what I've noticed very common, and I did it too, so it takes one to know one, but that we often get in this state where we distort ourselves and we distort our twin flame, especially if we have masculines who are immature in the sense that they don't have they don't have the experience to quite understand just how damnable some of their behavior is, or they were treated in such really crappy ways through childhood and through their past relationships and or their current karmic that they are distorting you. And even if you are being the most loving, kind, unassuming, unthreatening feminine ever, they have a hard time trusting that even more than they trust people that they know are going to hurt them. The fact that you are being divine feminine is more scary to them than if you were being just as dramatic and toxic as the people that they're wrapped up with, right? If they are. But we reflect that, and oftentimes we reflect that by using a inappropriately colloquial term known as narcissism, and we'll say, well, they're being a narcissist or things like that, which is kind of, I think, come to replace their being a dick. And I'd much prefer that you use that term than narcissist. Or what I and others will commonly do is make a separation of difference. There's a difference between someone who is an actual narcissist, like someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, or even if it's undiagnosed, if they are actually a grandiose narcissist or a covert narcissist, as in a victim narcissist, an actual narcissist is going to be a grandiose narcissist, and they're going to be someone who has narcissistic personality disorder. And actually, to be quite honest, I know people who literally have diagnosed NPD, and they are not the same as what people commonly call a narcissist, which is usually just somebody who is caught in karmic pain cycles, and they're not even aware that they are actually hurting other people. They don't have the experience or the maturity to have the level of empathy that they need, or they're so caught in their pain cycles that they feel like they need to protect themselves. They're in survival mode. So even if they have the empathy to recognize what they're doing, their nervous system, their entire body, their brain, their neurobiology is all sorts of haywired. And so there is a difference, and it's important to note the difference. And it's also important to recognize that we tend to pick up terms like this as a way of protecting ourselves. It feels like if you can say, well, my DM's being a narcissist, or my ex is a narcissist, or the karmic is a narcissist, that it feels like you can kind of divorce yourself from it and say, well, it's putting yourself on a pedestal, well, I'm not being narcissistic. Well, you are if you're calling someone else a narcissist, especially if you're not a trained and accredited psychologist. That's not, that's very ableist, and it's very inappropriate to do that. You can, however, look at what is narcissistic behavior, because what people are doing is looking at when somebody is behaving unempathetically, when they're being a jerk and they're being very selfish versus being self-interested or practicing self-care. But it's important to note that that is a distortion on your part if you're doing that, and you can start to get away from that by looking at, okay, this is a human being. Most human beings, 99.9% human beings, are not actual narcissists. However, that being said, especially in the US, we have a very narcissistic culture, and we are very much conditioned, especially men, to not value our emotions and not value expressing them, and certainly to not be vulnerable. One of my DM's biggest blocks is that he's afraid to be vulnerable because he'll be taken advantage of, and he has been multiple times in the past by many people. And so that can then result in somebody who disconnects and disassociates from their emotions. But you can tell usually the difference between somebody who's an actual narcissist and somebody who is just in their pain body, who's in what we call the other dimension or another dimension, because look at their behavior. A narcissist will intentionally try to bait you so that they can like screw you over and have all their fun with you, drain you of all your energy, and then discard you, because that's part of the process, and then draw you back in. Now, somebody who's in narcissistic energy or in another dimension is not trying to hurt you. They're often rationalizing that it's better to hurt you by ghosting you or not talking to you than it is to continue to share their feelings with you when they are wrapped up in a karmic situationship that they feel like they need to be loyal to because they jumped into it. Or they might not realize just how difficult of a situation they've left you in until spirit comes in and puts them in the same situation as their karma. And oftentimes what you'll see is they'll come back and be like, I never realized how hard that was. Like, I had a period of time where I have chronic pain stuff. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and my DM did not realize just how hard that can be at times. And I also had a time that I had to have foot surgery, and he really and he wasn't mean to me, but he certainly wasn't Florence Nightingale, and I didn't quite understand why he was frustrated or why he expected a lot of he didn't expect like the same level of like, say, stuff around the house or work for me, but he seemed frustrated at the healing time and things like that, or why I was moody and things like that. And then more recently this year, he got a really bad leg injury and told me that he never realized how helpless you can feel when you can't use a part of your body, especially of the lower extremities. That was a new experience for him. He had not been through that. Now, I could have qualified, had I been sitting in my ego, that the way he behaved with me was narcissistic, but was it really? No, it wasn't. It was a lack of experience. He had not been put through that experience himself before, so even though he was trying to have some empathy for it, he really didn't understand it. And I also, until I got into learning about Enneagram types, I'm a type 8. He's a type 6. I assumed that the way that I thought about things, the way I processed things, was the way to do it, was like the only healthy way to approach things. It's not. And even if I'm more practical or frugal about it, or more to the point with it, that doesn't mean that needs to be the only way. And that also doesn't include how we grow up and all the different things that create and shape us. Like, who am I to be the judge of how you should process things, or how you should think about them, or how much time it takes to do that, right? I could have been qualified as being very narcissistic in those moments. Was I? No, I didn't have the knowledge at the time. So it's very important to look at how we distort things, especially because distortions, and this is a psychological term, so look it up, we often perceive things in an immature and unhealthy way until we have more knowledge and or more experience, which is why we get put through karmic relationships, which happen outside of the twin flame journey too. We all go through this stuff. That's part of what karma is. It's like learning empathy, right? And it's important to sit down and look at these distortions. The other thing that's important is, if you really feel like, if you know who your twin flame is, or you feel like you do, and you're choosing this journey, because, be clear, it's a choice. You don't have to do it. But if you're really choosing it, then you need to stop calling your twin flame a narcissist, or even a jerk or a dick. Like, you need to stop distorting what they're doing, because for one, you're always reflecting. And if they're being a narcissist and you're calling them a narcissist, guess what? You are reflecting, because that's putting someone on a pedestal. It's splitting. Look that up too. And if you want the connection to change, I'll tell you, one of the most profound things that changed my connection with myself and my DM was when I stopped looking for ways to rationalize his behavior and separate it from my own. When I acknowledged and accepted the reflection, and when I realized that it was immaturity, not narcissism, and I started even to get away from looking at it as immaturity, that this is an experience that both of our souls wanted to experience in this lifetime, and that because of his immaturity, or when he's in another dimension, I've been provided with so much contrast that look at me, I almost got 1,000 subscribers, and I'm doing really good in my other work. My kids are really happy. I'm doing fantastic on my own. That stuff started to happen when I stopped thinking about either him or any of his karmics or any of my karmics as narcissists. And I released that, and then I stopped worrying about like what level they were at, because even to say immaturity is to assume that I am more mature. And even though I kind of am, I like being immature. I like being silly and goofy and playful. And so what is maturity? Like, if I'm playing pranks on people that are, that are nice, that people like, or if I'm playing with stuffies or playing board games to connect with my inner child, that could be considered immaturity by some. So it's subjective, like, stop looking for it's ego. Ego looks for things that are wrong with other people, and we often get into saying, well, they're a narcissist, or they're being a dick, or they're immature, because we're afraid that their actions and their lack of attention towards us mean that we are not good enough. It means that it's a way of saying, well, okay, it's not that I'm not good enough, it's that they're not ready, or that they're wrapped up in a situation, or blah 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 blah. and like I said, I've done all of this stuff. It's been processed through my head. It took a process to get to this point, to get out of that stuff. But I tell you what, I mean, I've had more communication and more confessions and more closeness and more maturity and more empathy from my DM when I get out of the distortions, when I get out of the other dimension myself, and I start to come up and look at him as human. And all of his experiences are beautiful, mature or not, narcissistic or not. And then I start to look at myself better too, and I start to look at my own journey as acceptable, and I stop creating and holding on to resentments with anybody. And then everybody starts to change, which is law of attraction. It is manifestation. It is magic. What you believe is true is true. So if you feel like your person is a narcissist or a jerk or immature, guess what? The universe is going to make sure they continue to be. That's what I mean. But the more you see them as a person who is growing and learning on a healing journey and on this beautiful twin flame journey with you, you can embrace the absurdity of that. And then you start to imagine them in a good way, as a good person who, everybody has good and bad, dark and light, and we all go through different cycles of different experiences. And if you hold the faith in the space in your mind and you look at them as their inner being, from your inner being, which is that everybody is love. Everybody does everything from a place of love, from the best way they know how, from the experiences they have at the time. Think about it. Like I said in an earlier video, nobody is born wanting to treat other people like crap. Nobody is born hurt. Nobody is born wanting to be toxic. That includes your DM. They're not making that choice intentionally, and largely they became that way because they had parents, siblings, exes, other people who constantly told them they were doing it wrong. They had people that were constantly telling them to do better, do it different, do it my way, suck it up, share the feeling, do this and that, and they started to believe them. And it's just like when we're kids. If you are constantly told you're a bad child, you will believe that you are a bad child. If you are constantly told that one of or both of your parents are bad people, that's a part of your identity. You will believe you are a bad person or a monster, or that you could hurt people. If you are in relationship with toxic people who tell you that you're doing it wrong or you're hurting them or things like that, you start to believe that you are that person. You, Divine Feminine, need to, at least in your mind and your heart, hold them as a good person who is exhibiting not nice behaviors. There's a difference between a bad person and bad behaviors. Okay? And then you need to get to the point where you recognize that spirits got you. Spirits take the wheel. You don't need to change their stuff. And you should never look to be in union with someone based on their potential. You want to base it on the reality, and they may never quite be in alignment with their inner being to the level that you hold space for them. And you got to decide: do you want to be in union with them as they are? Because that's what you need to look at it as. The way their 3D reality is now. But I guarantee you that when you start to get away from distortions and things like that, you'll see that they were never a bad person in the first place. They were never a narcissist. It was bad behavior, bad habits, addictive thinking, stuff like that, and a lot of karmic stuff. And here's the thing, you start to become a very different person to them when you start radiating the energy and communicating to them that you don't see them as a bad person, and you don't even need to talk about their bad behavior. Then you become that one person in their life who believes in them. Think about how you'd feel if you had that person in your life, which you do. It's me. I believe in you in that way. All right, everybody, I'm going to end this here, and I think later on I will start step 16 based on the Tower cards. All right, thank you so much for watching.